All right. So, a very dear friend of mine that I used to live with in New York, we had a great love of romantic comedies, and so declared that we would live our lives modeling the romantic comedy. It was a coping mechanism, like it's a way to feel better about how unromantic, anxiety-ridden, and pathetic our lives were. But it really helped. Like when you're late to a job interview and you're wearing an inappropriately short skirt and you're sitting across from this woman who's confused by your skirt, but maybe I'm just obsessing about the skirt. And now I'm telling her why I think I didn't go to college because my dad was sick and he convinced me that pursuing my acting career now was the only way. But he was just scared and didn't want me to leave. And how once I was watching him throw a green bottle, I thought, this is going to be my life until he dies. And how guilty I feel for thinking that. But then he got a little better and I moved across the country, but then moving to a new city didn't really solve the problem that I've been using disordered eating to harm a body that I believe is deformed because someone cut my crooked spine and fused metal rods and screws, and no one's going to love me because I'm not perfect. Because in a romantic comedy, I will leave this disastrous job interview and bump into a hottie with a retriever, and he thinks my neuroses and short skirt are charming. And we walk in the park at sunset, and there's this moment where our hands brush against each other. And I believe that I'm not a terrible daughter, and I'm not stupid, and I'm not fat, and I'm not deformed, and you're just a wealthy writer who wants to take care of me. This fantasy is enough to allow me to fall asleep that night without feeling like a complete failure. A few months after I sat across from this potential employer divulging far too much of my personal turmoil, I was very surprised to get an email from her asking if I wanted to interview for a different personal assistant job for a writer friend of hers. I wasn't too sure how this was going to fit into my romantic comedy, but regardless, I arrived to the interview at an apartment on the Upper West Side, right across from the park where they filmed the final scene of You've Got Mail. It was a good sign, I'm sure. And I found myself in the home of Peggy and Bob. Peggy's husband, Bob, had just arrived home from a 7-month tour of New York's hospitals and recovery centers after suffering a massive stroke that left the left side of his body asleep, as Peggy called it. There was a hospital bed in the living room, a large Haitian man trying to reposition Bob so his feet weren't hanging off the end, and this small Jewish mother who was soon to be my new boss, averting her eyes from it all. The very next day, I was employed and attending a wedding with them at the campus of Columbia University, a school I had once envisioned myself excitedly rushing about with a handful of textbooks, except now I was running across campus with Bob's walker trying to make it in time for his speech. He was adamant about standing, even though he hadn't stood for more than a few seconds in 7 months. The Haitian at Bob's left and I at his right, we held him up as he said a Jewish prayer of well wishes. And I thought, what in God's name have I gotten myself into? Over the next year and a half, I spent many days in that small apartment with Bob. I'd usually arrive and make him breakfast. His most requested were bullseye eggs. 2 sunny-side eggs, the whites just barely fully cooked, lots of salt and butter with lots of toast with lots of butter. It was hard to make things that he liked to eat. Too crunchy was hard to chew, too soft would get stuck in his mouth. Pasta got too cold too fast, and it always needed more blue cheese. I never knew someone could love blue cheese. Doing physical therapy with Bob wasn't always easy. Even though his left side was sleeping, he still could feel pain. Still, we would practice walking, his steps increasing all the time. He loved it when I would do, as he called it, the wobble dance. He He laughed every time, and I would just stand in front of him doing the wobble as he practiced standing. And Peggy would go out of town sometimes, and I would stay over. We would go to doctor's appointments and lunches and walks in the park, always with the help of his aide. There was a rotating door of aides that would stay with Bob 24/7, but for a long time we had a really solid oddball crew. Bombo, Francis, Bob, and I. Bob appointed us the Bob Squad. Many endeavors I planned usually ended up with us stranded somewhere in Manhattan, unable to get a handicap cab. Bob, some apocalyptic weather going on, and Bob clutching an umbrella, and me putting an umbrella over the aid, just weaving through pedestrian traffic. But we made it home, and we would get together dinner, and I would find something for us to watch together. And get this, he loved romantic comedies. We watched Notting Hill on more than one occasion. It was his favorite. I was always sad to leave Bob. Our time was special. I could make fun of him, call him Baby Bob when we had to talk about changing diapers. I'd roll my eyes and exclaim, "Ah, fuck, here's teenage Bob," when he'd get all moody and stubborn. We would exchange side glances and smirks when Peggy would start in about some political issue. Even when I would clip his toenails, he would find a way to make me laugh, telling stories about the man he was before his stroke. I experienced an unfamiliar sadness when he cried. His jaw would drop, his eyes would scrunch closed, and no sound would come out, but his shoulders would just shake up and down. It didn't matter if he was crying in a cheesy movie or giving a speech at his kids' weddings, or if we were just sharing a moment of gratitude. That knot in my throat when I saw him cry. Sometimes I would think, this is going to be my life. But was that so bad? I mean, maybe I was supposed to take care of other people. Or maybe I was just really good at avoiding taking care of myself. This one time, we were driving to the Hamptons for Bob's daughter's wedding, and this big handicapped man, a Russian named Lenny in the driver's seat, a coy man, but gracious DJ. You should have seen his reaction when I asked him about his burner phone. Anyway, Bob requested Joni Mitchell for our drive, and when the song California started to play, I could hear him singing behind me. And then the singing stopped, and I could sense movement, and I turned around and I could see him bawling silently. Such a schmaltz. And then he returned to singing for the last bit, looking at me and crooning, "Oh, will you take me as I am?" I just laughed at him, but turned away quickly because his tears were spreading like an infectious disease. I looked out the car window, quietly crying and hearing that question repeat itself over and over. I had come to the decision to move back to Los Angeles, and in the months before my move, I slowly stopped working for Peggy and Bob. When I found out during this time Bob started to have some more serious medical issues, I couldn't help but feel guilt. Then when Peggy told me they had moved him to a care facility because she could no longer handle the burden alone, I understood more completely the term heartbreak. I went to visit him before I left New York, and when I walked in, his lopsided grin broke across his face as he said, "Hi, Bubbles." Hearing this term of endearment that he so often used, I knew he wasn't upset, but I still couldn't help feeling like I had abandoned him. I wished so badly that I could be that person to stay with him, stay and be his Bubbles, and stay for this man who had taken me for who I was, showed me how to share that compassion with myself, stay for the people who had awakened the part of me that was asleep. One last time, I brought him to his PT appointment a few floors up and joked with him, as we always had done. When it was time to go, I could see his eyes start to crinkle, his jaw drop, and his shoulders shake. I put my hand on his shoulder, and he put his hand over mine, and I told him simply, I love you. He was really hard to understand when he cried, but I'm pretty certain I know what he said back. The walls to the physical therapy room were glass. I left the room and stood in the hallway. I could see Bob through the glass, sitting in his wheelchair, his back turned to me, his shoulders still shaking. I waited there a while, tears running down my face, believing though that I was good, that I was smart, that I was beautiful, that I was whole. We didn't meet at a park at Sunset, and he wasn't going to be the man that was going to take care of me. But I left New York having lived my romantic comedy, as strange and unexpected as it was. I was just a girl standing in front of a boy doing the wobble.